Hello and welcome to the Good Old Days, our Raynham program focusing on the history of Raynham. I'm Pat Riley and our host is retired Selectman Don McKinnon. Welcome back.
Thank you, Pat. Nice to be back. It's one of those things that will take up a few of the events of the town.
Sure. We've talked a lot about important people, but there are events in the life of any town, too, or community.
That make a town what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I thought we'd start off with the Borden Colony. What's your memory of the Borden Colony, Pat?
Just that it's a wonderful location right now, but I understand there was some wheeling and dealings that went on to make it happen.
In the old days, I try not to mix these things up because Jordan Marsh and the Borden Colony sound too much alike for an Irish boy like myself. But the Borden Colony now was originally a hospital extension of the Taunton State Hospital. And it fed not only the Taunton State Hospital, but multitude is farmed for the many of the state hospitals in Massachusetts. It was called the deeded to the Taunton State Insane Asylum. Is the way it was worded in those days, and different families contributed land to the state. That's the way they did it in those days. They deeded it to people and things of this nature. So several hundred acres ended up at a period of time, and then why would be a good question. That would be for historians, which I'm not, to figure out what happened. What happened was, though, that it lost its impact, and so therefore the state hospitals began to buy produce from different farmers. Now, was it political? I don't know. Could they not get the people to farm anymore? That might be, because in the old days, Pat, if it was winter, the police would drive down the street. If a person was homeless, they'd say, get in the car. And they'd drive them up to the Borden Colony or to the Taunton State Hospital, and they'd house them for the winter. Well, they didn't freeze to death. They ate and things of that nature. So they kept a lot of people over a period of time, though, working the farm. And there were families. Lou Pacheco's dad, I think, worked there. There were many people in Raynham in the past century who worked that farm professionally. The Eastman family, I think, was the prime farmer in that area. So the Borden Colony, providing produce, going along. The building was very large. It was a brick building where they all stayed. Now, where the Lions Club is, that was the cafeteria. They ate there. Where the senior center, there was no such building. The other buildings around were for people to live who were working the farm and things of that nature. So it was a ongoing production, the Borden Colony.
I know at one point the large building there was looked at it as a possible town hall.
It was to be a town hall. That's, you know, people are fun. I love this town, but people are funny, Pat, honest to goodness. We passed an article to bond to make that huge brick building into the town hall. We even had plans. Jimmy DuPont always used to say, I got the plans in my attic. Well, there were plans all over the place. And it was to be a town hall. It would have been a beautiful town hall. And we had the okay to bond, you know, and the taxes would have gone up. It was prior to overrides. It was prior to Prop 2.5. So we were going to do it, and it was all set to do. Suddenly, bang, in came 2.5. And they were ready under 2.5. See, prior to 2.5, I understand why people don't want to pay taxes. You and I don't want to pay taxes. But 2.5 was a mistake, I believe, for small towns especially, because the cities always play games. They don't have to worry about 2.5. Towns have to really do it. People pass laws, and towns have to really do what people say. So anyway, we had at that time a 4% cap. It was a state law, 4%. And we were doing fine. What people don't understand is you can't stay at 2.5 and not go bankrupt. So therefore, suddenly came 2.5. Well, we'd have to lay off 2 firefighters, lay off 2 policemen, lay off 12 teachers. The whole thing went crazy. And we had no money. We couldn't make our budget balance. We didn't understand debt exclusion and override. So we had to live with the money we had. And automatically then, we had to make a decision. Do we want to have all those layoffs? Or do we want to discontinue what we had allocated for the budget for the new town hall. We voted against the new town hall. People whose jobs we saved went on to badmouth us about, well, there was a beautiful town hall and those selectmen, you know, they didn't know what they were doing. And so we did it to save your job.
Sure.
South School was supposed to close. So I'm not sure about the North, but schools were going to close. And so anyway, we voted. We kept the South School and the North School open at that time. And of course, we had the Merrill and the junior high. And that is because of the fact that we deboweled the Jordan Borden Colony. And so there it's set. Now, to get back to, however, because I've jumped a gun to say that, to get back to how do we get the Borden Colony?
Right, because it was state-owned.
State-owned. The beauty of government is the big fish eat the little fish. So the people who owned the Borden Colony was the Commonwealth of Mass. They had nothing to do with it. They didn't know what they'd do if they kept it, but they weren't going to give it to you. Now, they ran into the same thing with the Miles Standish. Federal government owned that. That's where the place where during World War II they had prisoners of war, and they had soldiers that were going to go overseas there. And so the state had a terrible time getting it from the federal, and the local had a terrible time getting it from the state, because that's the way government is. It's a strange business we're in, you know. So we tried to get the Borden Colony. Now, let me say who some of the players were. You've heard of Oliver Ames. I mean, Ames was the shovel that made that family how they owned a third of the entire town of Easton. They even named the school after the Ames. The direct descendant, right in the line, was John Ames. He was the representative. He represented Raynham, Easton, and he was a terrific guy, very nice guy. He was the rep. The senator was Johnny Parker. People who are around town now will legendary, wrote books. He was just as he should have been, we always felt, rep. Because what happened was, though, Peggy Heckler made the jump for the job and she won it. She became rep. So there was Johnny Parker, there was John Ames. Johnny Welsh, who's still now, he's Deacon John, and he's semi-retired. He comes out of retirement every once in a while, Johnny, was conservation, and he was representing us. And so we were, Arthur Pillsbury was working towards this. All the names that you heard in the past, Harry Carey, of course, was always in everything, and Donnie Francis, I was there, Al Porter was there. We were all working to get the Borden Colony. Eddie Alexo, who was a friend of mine, he was the superintendent of schools.
In Taunton.
Yes, and he was one of the trustees of the Taunton State Hospital.
Really?
And this came under the Taunton State. And they didn't want to give it up. They didn't want to give it up. So naturally, being good people, we decided to go over their heads. And we decided to go to Boston. So we went to Boston. Well, they came down and they had meetings, and we worked over the land and all that. And we just couldn't get it done. No matter what we said, we couldn't get that land. And in came a young man, and he beat me in the primary. You know, some people make the people that they oppose their enemy. He became one of my best friends, Alan Chalker. There was David Canepa, and there was about four, on the other side, Jimmy DuPont ran on the Republican side. We all ran for rep because Peter Flynn decided to go for sheriff. And so we all ran for rep in 1980. Alan Chalker won the race, and his wife still works for the school system.
She is, Mary Jean.
Mary Jean's a wonderful girl. Yeah, she's married. She stayed with Alan. She has to be a saint, right? So anyway, I kid them a lot about that. He now, as a matter of fact, is the town administrator, I believe, of Rockland.
I think so.
And he's doing a wonderful job, and they all love him. Do you know how I know that? He tells me that. He tells me I'm doing a wonderful job, and they all love me. And he wouldn't lie. He wouldn't lie to me. So anyway, so Alan Chalker was voted representative. And he worked a miracle. He turned the legislature, first year rep, turned them around.
Didn't he actually bring Governor King down to fly over it in a helicopter? Is this story?
Yeah, you know.
Is that true, or is that legend?
Donnie McKinnon didn't know how to work the seatbelt. I had never been up in a helicopter in my life. And there I am, I'm chairman of the board. So we're down in the St. Anne's parking lot, and Eddie King, who was the only governor, my favorite governor, because the only governor ever to come officially to the town of Raynham,
Really?
not to be political,
Yeah.
but to do his
To actually
job.
do something.
And Ed King came down, and Alan Chalker got him to come down. And Ed King and myself, and King is there trying to hook my thing up for me like this. Where do they find these country bunking people, you know? And up we go in the helicopter. Well, he's telling me how beautiful it looked, which it did look beautiful. And I'm telling him, you know, Governor, this land really isn't of any value, you know, really. I mean, I know it looks good from the sky. Everything looks good from the sky. I said, it's really not that good, you know. And so we're baiting back and forth with each other. But anyway, Alan Chalk is the guy that pulled it off. And not only did he pull that off, but he worked very close with Raynham on the next one, if we get to it, the Jordan Marsh site, hazardous waste. So he did a wonderful job. And he pulled it off. Now, for those who think we own the Borden colony, I hate to say this, we don't. The state never gives anything up. And so what they did was they gave us the title to it as long as, so in other words, they always have the ability to reel it back in. As long as we agriculturally did the remaining of the land that wasn't designated for the following: park and rec, athletic fields, the Conservation Commission, historical land and things of that nature. And it's designated where it is. As a matter of fact, I know the people out there can keep a secret. So where they have the Raynham Pride Day, that is actually down into the land that's supposed to be agricultural. The gazebo had to be moved up on the hill. Those who notice where the gazebo is placed, that is not in the agricultural land. But anyway, this stuff was given over, and we had originally the Wyman family. Arthur Wyman was chairman of the school committee for many years. His family is well regarded. His son, Peter's son, his grandson, was in that contest just the other night on Mr. BR. And it's just a wonderful man. His granddaughter was a star of a musical at BR. My granddaughter was a freshman at the time. She was a senior. Wonderful, the Wyman, a wonderful family. Well, the state gave them more money not to farm anymore, so they bought them out. So, but they were the original farmers over at the Borden Colony, the Wyman family, and they would, because they had cows and things. Well, you know what it is now? It's a mobile home park in Bridgewater. Good for them. So anyway, Wyman had it, Reed Brothers had it, and now the Olson, I'll say the Olson family, has it. And so but we've always had, and the people wonder, well, how come you got so much land that really isn't been, you know, you're not growing things on it now? Well, we hay it, we got pumpkins, we got Olson's got flowers. That's agricultural. It's not by accident we do that. And I wouldn't say it's not by choice, but it isn't by choice, it's by demand. We will do it, or they'll take that land back. Now, what have we got there? We've got, now we have the Borden Colony.
Fields and,
And I always kid Alan Chalker. I said to Parker, you got to name something after Alan Chalker. I know he beat me, but he did it clean. and it was a good race. We had fun. We had fun running against each other. This is why I've always said, with all due respect, when Raynham and Bridgewater get together, Bridgewater has 2 times the population. You are not going to win in a race like that. So he said to me one time, he said, how come you're running, Don? You know you can't win. And I says, Alan, you don't understand. At this time in my life, I enjoy running. Part of the pleasure was to run. And did I know I was going? I'll tell you how I might have beaten him, though. And his nephew is dating a young lady who's working for the town of Raynham now, and I met him the other night. David Canepa was the chairman of the Board of Selectmen. And so that's not chopped liver. And Alan was the executive secretary for Peter Y. Flynn, who was the rep. You know, those were the 2 guys going against each other. And I said to David Canepa at the time, David, you're going to have to go for this guy. Otherwise, this guy's going to whip you, because Peter Y. is for Alan. And I said, I'm coming into the town where they, you know, Raynham is not their most popular word, And I said, the only way I'm going to win is if you two guys beat each other's brains in, quite honestly, and then I slide in.
Sure.
But I said, what's going to happen is, of course, I'm not telling you to go for Alan for me. I'm saying that you're not going to beat him unless you go for Alan, because you can't beat him unless you go for him. He admitted this to me when the votes came in. He said, yeah, I guess you were right. I should have, because he was the gentleman. I used to smoke in a pipe, and he was a gentleman. I said, nobody cares about pipes anymore, and nobody cares about gentlemen. You don't win by being a gentleman. Yeah, but anyway, that's how it. Alan Chalker was the guy that pulled the miracle of the board. His name should be on there somewhere. The reason I tell you this, Pat, was after the next election, he ran against a Jackie Lewis, and at the time, he won't admit this. He was building a house, and he finished the house. There was the boom occurred at that time. House prices were banging. Wow! He ended up selling the house and decided to build another one. I think that was it. He'll correct me, but don't listen to him. It ended up that he didn't work enough on that race, and
she went around door to door throughout the town.
She won the race. Now, she won it the way you should win it. She worked. It was part of Taunton, a couple of precincts there, Raynham, Bridgewater. And I think East Bridgewater at the time. Now it's Raynham and Bridgewater, but it was those different communities. As a matter of fact, part of it eventually went over to Easton. So, I mean, we've been divided all around. But the real votes are in Bridgewater. There's no doubt about that. And what I'm saying is, comes under that no good deed goes unpunished. Guy got us hundreds of acres. He got us a place that we have now about, 7 fields or 5 fields at least over there. Got the senior center. Got the
gazebo park. It's all such a wonderful spot.
It's just a wonderful spot. And he did all that. And of course, then naturally we voted him right out. Isn't this a great country? Why do things happen this way? I mean, it's the nature of the business. But Jackie Lewis was in for like 10 years. And then she never lost. She just retired and decided not to go anymore. And that started the cycle of other people who were in there. So, but to get back to finish off on the board and colony, I guess, unless there's other questions on it, what happens is there is a designated area which I would like to see the day when the Commonwealth gives us more land for recreation. Because in reality, pumpkins and haying and all that, come on, will you, give us some more land. But, they don't want to give us what they gave us. And I've always been concerned that someday the Commonwealth would want to do something like one of their green type things and just blitz the board and colony. So I've always been kind of defensive of the board and colony to keep it the way it is.
Absolutely.
But as we sit now, Pat, that is where the board and colony is. The people that deeded it over was basically Ed King, who to me was, I've always said, and Gordon Luciano, however, which we've got to get Gordon on one of these days, Pat.
Sure.
Gordon Luciano's father was very close to 2 of the leading people in the country. And one of them was Ed King. The other, of course, was John Volpe, who was a former governor. So his dad was very close. And as a matter of fact, I've got a picture in my office of holding with Gordon Luciano, and it's a picture of Ed King there, So Ed King was the guy that all these other people, and some of them I was for, I voted for them, I worked for them, never came to Raynham, never came to Raynham. And so Ed King, Alan Chalker, the legislature, but the background work of the Arthur Pillsbury, the John Welshes,
it all factored in.
John Ames, Johnny Parker. They got a school named after Johnny Parker over there, and obviously got the Ames. So there's 2 people. The school's named after their family. John Parker, the school was named after him. It is. It's right next to the high school now, I believe. The John Parker. He was a wonderful guy. He and his wife, May. I'll give you one more on them, though. He comes to me, he says, Donald, he and Al Porter used to play ball versus each other. They might have even run against each other at one time. And I think Al might have dusted him off a few times, you know, and he said, you really should name a bridge after Al. And I said, John, let's be realistic. All of southeastern Mass is John and May Parker. I said, there's nothing that isn't named after you. He said, the bridge going over 24 isn't named after me. And I said to him, did you leave that bridge for Al? He said, yes, I did. And he did. By the time it finally came to pass, though, Irving Wall was the senator who was there for that time, because Teddy Alexo had ran, and he didn't beat John Parker, but he discouraged John Parker from running, because I said, John, why aren't you running? And these are all inside stories, Pat, which nobody cares about but me, you know. But Johnny Parker wanted to run again, but he had promised Teddy that he wouldn't run again. And so what Teddy did was he called him up. They were friends. And he said, I've got X number of dollars in my war chest. John Parker hadn't had an opponent in a quarter of a century, if not 30, 40 years. And Johnny went over and found out, yes, he did have that much money, and he didn't run again. And then in came Teddy Alexo. And then business reversals happened, and Teddy Alexo lost to Irving Wall. So Irving Wall was the senator when that people who now go over the bridge on Route 24, when you come up, you know, over Route 24, you'll see the Albert Porter, and that was because Johnny Parker had left that for him.
Right.
And so these are the people historically in the town who had worked over the period of years, you know, the Arthur Pillsburys and the Eddie Murbys and those people, Ted Janis, all these people worked toward the Board and Colony.
So when people drive by there now on King Philip Street, just think there's a
Take
lot
note
more
of the
to
fact
it.
there was an awful lot to it, and they also voted out the guy that did it, which really was. And Ed King got voted out. Ed King, I think he got knocked off. I think by I'm trying to think of who the guy was that beat him, but he had the original victory because he took all the people who were angry and got them all together, and then the next time around the convention, he was dead in the water. They were not going to be for him. And so what we did was we took Bristol County, which is us, and we said to him, come in our way, though. When you come in our way, because nobody at the convention was for him. And we were all for him, naturally.
Right,
and so we had him come in through our way, and everybody's jumping up and raving. It looks like he's really doing great. Well, he wasn't. He wasn't. I think it was Michael Dukakis that knocked him off that time. But yeah, you know, speaking as a Democrat, he was a borderline Republican. As a matter of fact, I think when he passed, I think he had changed over to be a Republican. And so, but anyway, he was to us the favorite governor, and it was his signature. That if Alan, you know, didn't talk him into it, Alan Chalker was the man who, they got to name something after him someday.
Another thing, Don, and we're not going to have a chance to talk too much about it, we'll have to continue, is when we talk about having a real impact on this town of Raynham, is that the Jordan, what was originally Jordan Marsh property,
Marsh site.
What's now Raynham Woods Commerce Park.
Yes.
And a lot of people probably don't realize that at one point Jordan Marsh had purchased that and was going to build a mall there, so one of their big stores.
That's right.
And then the economy went down, and so they decided not, and there was a possibility it was going to become a hazardous dump site.
Waste site, yes, yeah. Well, we got 5. We can get started. The rest is a tease.
Okay, good.
So we can do it in the future. But what happened with Jordan Marsh is it was owned at the time by the family named Mitten. Isn't that a great name, though? Because he used to name things after, and Mitten. Could have been Glove, but it was Mitten. So anyway, his name was Mitten. And he owned a cottage or a house down the Cape, which people from Boston did. And he looked at this thing and he said, whoa, look at this here. Route 24 goes right by. You got Fall River, New Bedford, Taunton, Brockton, the Cape. And he thought the Cape could come up. And at that time, New Bedford and Fall River were up around 80 to 90,000 people. And so he looked and he ended up with like 1 million people who were in the given area. So he bought that piece of land, and it was designated, called the Jordan Marsh site because he owned Jordan Marsh. I mean, there are people around today, Pat, who don't even know who Jordan Marsh
Really?
was.
No. That was before Macy's.
See, was it
before
before you?
Filene's.
But yeah, it was Jordan Marsh and Filene's. Those were the two biggest stores. And so those, you know, they pretty well, even today, Filene's is still almost known, you know. Macy's bought out Filene's.
Right.
Macy's started in Haverhill. It built itself in New York, but it started in Haverhill. So up came these people, and Marsh is getting ready to retire, though. Mitten is getting ready to retire. And the board of directors says, you got hundreds of thousands of people, but they don't have 5 cents. New Bedford, Fall River, Taunton, Brockton. Think about it. There were no unions in those places at the time. There was no money at that time. So even though you had the numbers, you didn't have the people who could do it. So they blocked Mr. Mitten from doing that. If he had been allowed to do that, it would have been what today is called the Braintree Mall. That was the money that was coming up this way. So they moved it back, and they went
Closer
back
to
to
Boston.
which is logical. Yeah. So anyway, that is what happened to the Jordan. An airplane would land there once in a while. They ticket them for doing that. They had a coffee shop up there, I think, or something like that. As a matter of fact, Clive Olson will correct me, you know, but that little place that they have for a beautiful office now, if you go down to Olson's down on South Street, and you see there's a beautiful little building there with a little parking lot. They just redeveloped it within the past 5 years, I would say, for an office for the Olson family. You know, prior to that, I think that was the coffee shop that used to be up on the hill. And I thought I think they moved it down. Clive probably bought it for $5 and moved it down there to get it down there. So Jordan Marsh had a show you how far it went, though. They actually developed it. I mean, it was plain. That's why airplanes were landing there. It was all leveled off, and it was all set to go. And that is why the Jordan Marsh site was sitting there. What we called them, we used to use this term. They may still use this term. You ever heard this one, Pat? Land banking.
Yes.
The word, a lot of people out there, business people will know what I'm talking about, land banking. You take a piece of land, and you got enough money to sit on it, and you can wait till the time is right. In the meantime, you're writing it off, which is something which businesses do all the time. They buy things to write off. So they were taking the loss off of that. And we were trying to get them to do something. So finally, they were bought out by, I cannot think of the name of the corporation. They were from Canada, and their main office then was in New York. They bought out the Jordan Marsh site, and that's when it became, they hoped, the hazardous waste site. Now, the hazardous waste site also has to do with Ed King as the heavy. So when we get back to this next time around, if we get to this, if we don't have guests, which we're supposed to have guests, but if we don't have guests, we are the guests.
That's right.
Yeah, and what we'll find out the next time around is that they were going to have something in the area of New Bedford, of a hazardous sludge type. Where was it going to go? Well, the first place it was going to go was to East Taunton, up near the school in East Taunton. It was crazy. So anyway, that's where Ed King was going to put it there. And the next time around, I will explain how, as much as we loved it, and we still love Ed King, he passed, we love that guy, but he actually made it so that there was no way we could block it.
Really?
And yet we did, didn't we, Pat?
You did, and what a difference that's made in
I'm
the town of
telling you,
Raynham.
what a country. This is amazing what you can do
Excellent.
by
Another
job
thing
owning.
we have to talk about, too, in a future show is you mentioned about running for political offices. Why nobody does that anymore?
Yes, we'll get into that a little bit more.
Some of the hot elections that we've had in Raynham in the past.
Oh, I wish we could get the people in who are into them. See,
Maybe we'll
if we could get
try.
Donnie Francis and Mike Sylvia in here, that would be the coup of all. That would be it.
That was the Sign Wars election.
Ah, wonderful.
In any case, we want to thank all of you for being with us, and we will be back here next month with our next episode of The Good Old Days. Thanks for joining us.